Joining us now is Daniel Levy, the chairman of Tottenham Football Club and the longest-serving chairman in the Premier League. Daniel, good afternoon.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with a quote that you've heard a million times over. It comes from Sir Alex Ferguson, that dealing with Daniel Levy is more painful than hip surgery. Is that a compliment?
You know what? I just act in the best interest of my club. So some people may take it not as a compliment. I don't know. You have to ask my fans.
Where do you think that reputation comes from?
Well, the answer is because we're totally self-sufficient. We have to always try and work harder than everybody else, maybe, and drive a hard bargain. But I'm not going to apologise for it. As I said, I'm acting in the best interest of the club.
You're known as a hard negotiator from people who have dealt with you over the last 2 decades. Can we talk about Daniel Levy's art of the deal? What is your approach to negotiating?
I always say to people that I think I'm tough but fair, and if you agree something with me, I stick to it.
Was the Harry Kane transfer difficult?
Not particularly. Dealing with Bayern Munich, they were gentlemen. The CEO of Bayern, I thought, was exceedingly nice gentleman. We went out for lunch. We've become good colleagues now, and I look forward to our next transaction together.
When did Harry come to you and say, it's time to go, I'm leaving?
I don't think it wasn't really like that with Harry. So Harry was willing to stay, but he wasn't willing this summer to sign a new contract. He didn't say that to me that he wanted to leave. He didn't say that he would never sign a new contract, but he wouldn't commit this summer. And of course we were in a very difficult position, had 1 year on his contract, and as a club, as I said, we're self-sufficient. We couldn't live in a dream that he would sign a contract. We had no guarantee, and therefore when Bayern Munich came along, he was willing to go to Bayern Munich, and we agreed a deal.
You've since disclosed there is a buyback clause. That's getting a lot of attention and a lot of fans excited. Can we talk about the terms of that buyback clause? What is it?
If I'm honest, I think the actual precise detail of the contract with Bayern Munich should remain confidential. All I would say is if Harry one day wants to come back to the Premier League and he wants to come to Tottenham, we would have the ability to purchase him.
Could you give us some idea? Is that a set price at a defined time, or is it a set price across any time of the contract?
As I said, it's confidential.
You've revealed just a little bit. The prospect of Harry Kane coming back to the football club is something you would welcome?
Harry was a great servant to the club, an amazing player, someone that came from our academy. But you can't look into the future. Who knows?
Is a contract in football what it used to be? A commitment to a football club across a defined period, or a way that a football club maintains value of the asset, the football player? How do you see contracts now? Have we lost that commitment to the club they agreed to be with? I
think, like in everything, it depends on the individual. Harry was absolutely committed. You could see that every game that he appeared in. Other players may be different. That's to do with personality. I don't think it's to do with contracts.
We've talked a lot about Saudi Arabia and the disruption in this summer transfer window, not just for English football, but for the whole of European football. Are you getting players knocking the door now saying, I've seen Neymar's contract in the newspaper and I want a slice of that? Has this changed things for you?
I think you have to look at the Saudi Arabia situation as, it gave a huge influx of money into the market. The market is particularly tough outside of the UK at the moment. And I don't see that what's happening in Saudi Arabia is going to have any direct bearing in terms of player contracts in Europe.
What do you expect it will change?
Well, it's another market for players to look to. Not every player will want to go to Saudi Arabia, but just as not every player wants to go to Germany or France or wherever. It's
a price-insensitive buyer coming into the market, which surely changed things drastically. You're now competing with clubs that have ties to sovereign nations. Does that make it harder now to succeed on the field than when you first started more than 20 years ago leading this football club?
I think it's very different now. I think that now there's a lot more money in the game, which does create its own complications. However, there's now new rules being introduced where they want to create a dynamic where clubs are much more self-sufficient. So I think that will involve cost control measures. We've already seen UEFA introduce new regulations. So I think it won't be as dramatic as people think in terms of the new influx of money, because I think we're going to have to operate within new rules.
Do you sense that UEFA's bark is worse than its bite sometimes, that it talks a lot about doing these things, but certain clubs are able to bend the rules and get around it without much punishment?
That may have been the situation historically, but I think now there's a genuine willingness throughout football that we need to get our house in order. We need to be self-sufficient to protect the clubs that we all love.
When you say we, are you talking about Tottenham, or are you talking about Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, all of football?
I'm talking generally across football. Obviously, there's always going to be exceptions, but I think fans, I think that the owners of clubs throughout Europe want to make sure that their clubs are self-sufficient.
Joe Lewis has got his own legal problems. He's transferred his holding of the football club to a family trust. We understand that dynamic and how things have changed in the last couple of years on that front. Technically, that means you no longer have that big billionaire backer. Do you need one to succeed? Is that something that Tottenham needs?
Well, firstly, the ownership of Tottenham has been of no relevance to the operations of Tottenham for the last 20 plus years. It's always been self-sufficient. As far as very wealthy people owning football clubs, as I said, the new rules now are going to be engineered to such an extent that hopefully you don't need to be a very wealthy owner in order to have a successful club.
Would you be open to selling a stake?
My answer to that question has always been the same for 23 years. We have 30,000 shareholders who own approximately 13.5%. We run this club as if it's a public company. If anyone wants to make a serious proposition to the board of Tottenham, we will consider it along with our advisors. And if we felt it was in the interest of the club, we would be open to anything.
Has anyone made an offer?
Over the years, many people have made offers, but there's never been an offer that's been...
Well, give us an idea of what those offers have looked like. Where have they come from?
All parts of the world. The Far East, the Middle East, America. But nothing has been put on our table that we felt has been in the interest of shareholders.
Does that mean it was just insufficient in terms of size? Or it was the wrong kind of people and the wrong kind of contract?
Lots of reasons. For us, as a board, we look at we're only custodians of this club. We want to take this club to another level. I think we've shown progression over the last 20 years. We've made a big investment in our capital projects, in our team. And if someone came along and we felt that it could take us to another level, we'd look at it.
For you personally, being at the club for more than 20 years, the last big title, if we can call it that, was the League Cup back in 2008. From your perspective, how will you know when your time is up and it's time to walk away and actually actively look for that change in ownership? How would you know? What would you look for? What would be the tell?
I've got no real interest to leave Tottenham, but I have a duty to consider anything that anyone may want to propose. And it's not about me, it's about what's right for the club.
The stadium's been a big project for you, and clearly that's right for the club, and other people are starting to copy you as well. How big of an initiative has that been for Tottenham Football Club, and how do you think it's going to really underpin the success in not just years to come, but potentially decades?
I think people don't realise how big a project building a stadium is. That project took us probably about 17, 18 years from start to finish. I think you've got to take a very, very long-term view. I think that it obviously has a major impact on the club, positive and negative, because you don't build a stadium for nothing. We've got more debt than any other club in Europe. Luckily for us, we managed to fix the debt at a low interest rate, so we're not really going to feel too much pain in paying back the mortgage over the next 30 odd years. But doing it today, I think, is very difficult.
A multi-purpose stadium as well. It's not just about football anymore, is it? It's music, concerts. It's about everything else and all above.
Well, that was done for two reasons. One is, when you look at the cost of building a stadium, you're talking about such huge sums of money. In our case, it was £1.25 billion. I think today it would be over £2 billion.
Wow.
And you have to find ways of paying for that asset. And just having football games is not enough of income to
So what does music bring in, Daniel? Give me an idea of what a Taylor Swift, Beyonce music concert brings in for Tottenham. How much money can you make from something like that?
Well, every concert's different. So it's not just concerts, it's boxing, rugby, all sorts of events. You're not going to justify spending the money by all those other events. What they do, though, they make a contribution to the capital cost. I would say that over a full year, we may make 20-30 million pounds of additional revenue as a result of it.
And what's the gate receipts look like just in terms of football over a season? How does that compare? How does that stack up?
Well, our gate receipts now are over 100 million pounds
a season. Yeah. So you get about a third extra doing music concerts. What about naming the stadium? I've seen about 20 different Allianz stadiums around the world now. What about naming the stadium? Where are you on that now?
So the answer is when we first started building the stadium, name rights was an important component. I would say that as we've gone through the process, and unfortunately the pandemic interrupted the strategy of finding the right naming rights partner, we've sort of realised that the stadium we've created, and it's actually turned out better than we originally intended, has created so much noise around the world that the profile of our name, Tottenham Hotspur, has grown, and therefore we've seen another value. And so if we get the right naming rights partner, and when I say that I mean somebody who pays the right money in the right sector, then we're willing to consider doing it, but we're not as tied to doing it now as perhaps we would have been when we first looked at building the stadium.
I don't expect you to give me a price, but when you say the right sector, what does that mean?
Well, I guess so. For instance, if it was in the betting sector, probably that would be a sector we wouldn't entertain.
That's not something you want to be a part of.
No. But things change. But I would say at the moment there isn't somebody that we're engaged with today that I would be jumping up and down that saying we must do this.
Have you changed your mind about it?
No, as I said just before, I think we've realised that the profile of all the events that we're having at the stadium, in addition to soccer events, that it's really helped the name of Tottenham Hotspur. And part of what we're trying to do now is create a bigger club. Everything we're doing is the football is at the heart of what we're doing, and we need a bigger fan base. So the relationship we now have with Formula One and with NFL is building a new fan base for us.
Brand value and the size of the franchise. When you go through the top 10 most expensive, most valuable teams in world sports, you find a lot of them in the United States. From your perspective, what can be learned about how those franchises are run in the US? Is there something unique about the businesses and the leagues and the way they're constructed? Is there something we can learn from them in the Premier League, in European football?
It depends how you define value. If you're defining it in terms of the price that someone has bought one of those clubs for, then the US at the moment would signify that the value of those clubs is higher than what they are in Europe. Although I do think over time that would change. If you talk about brand value, I'm not sure I agree. I mean, Manchester United probably has, and Barcelona and those type of clubs, probably have far bigger brand value than some of the franchises in the US.
You're having a better season. You seem to be in a better place. Are you happy right now with how things are going?
My feet are firmly on the ground. We've played 5 games and we've started off well, but it's how you end that counts.
The mood around the club seems to have changed. Big Ange, has he changed that?
He's had a very, very big impact. We wanted a manager that we need to go back in time to our real DNA, and we needed somebody that understood that, there's no easy fix to win. We're very much a club that believes in the academy, producing players that can become hopefully superstars at Tottenham. We're not a club that can buy success. That's the reality, and we have to understand that. And we needed a manager that was completely aligned with our philosophy. We needed somebody that bought into that would relate to our players. Our players would fall back in love with the fans and vice versa. And really, it's so noticeable. I mean, you come to our training ground now, the staff, our stadium on a non-match day, everyone is on the same page.
You say we need to go back in time. You've been a fan for life. Do you remember your first game?
Yeah, I think I was 7 or 8 years old, and I got taken by my great uncle. Remember having a rosette and having a hot dog, and I was in the stands. It was an amazing experience, and ever since then I've been a fan.
Does it upset you when certain sections of the stadium are saying Levy out and they're singing that on match day? Do you hear that as a chairman watching the game?
I'm very thick-skinned. I realise that when the team is winning, the manager's a genius, and when the team's not winning, the chairman's shouldn't be the chairman. I ignore it, but it's not nice for a family.
Big Ange has come after Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho. Can we talk about dealing with difficult characters? What was it like dealing with Antonio Conte near the end?
I had a good relationship with both Jose and Antonio. They're different, and as I said to my fan forum last night, I said to them, I made a mistake. Right? They are great managers. They were just not right for this club, and the way they want to win is different, really, for how we need to win.
What does that mean? They're proven winners. They've won before. What does that mean?
I think there's a couple of things. I think our style of football that our fans crave for is we want attacking football, and if that means winning 4-3, then so be it. Whereas I think their style of football is, they don't mind being defensive and winning 1-0. And we were in a situation where we were so desperate to win. I think at that moment in time, when I go back, 4 or 5 years ago, I think we would have taken any way of winning. But we didn't win. And therefore, when you don't win, you get a very disgruntled fan base with our fans.
Where did the pressure come from to begin with to hire names like that? I was listening to the recent fan forum you did, and you mentioned that certain players wanted a certain kind of manager. You alluded to that. I'm paraphrasing to some extent. Were there certain players that wanted that kind of name? Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte? Do they come and knock the door and ask for that?
And it wasn't about the name. It was about they wanted to win, just as much as I did. And then we'd come so close with Maurizio, who was a great manager, and he did fantastic things for this football club. And we got frustrated, and I think we went through a phase where we said, well, let's try something different, and it didn't work.
Define success for this season. Let's finish there. What is success for you this year?
That's a difficult one for me to answer, because I think I'd be putting unfair pressure on my new coach. Honestly, I think for us, though, we want to play football where we're entertained. We want to come to a game where we're looking forward to coming to a game, where we believe we have a really good chance of winning. We just want to entertain our fans.
Entertain and win?
Of course, win, but win with style.
Daniel Levy, I can tell you this wasn't more painful than hip surgery. Thank you, sir. Daniel Levy, the chairman of Tottenham Football Club.